Hi, Tim here with Tonya Ladipo, CEO of the Ladipo Group, a Black-owned company dedicated to the emotional wellness of Black and African American people and communities. Tanya is a keynote speaker and has been a featured panelist for a number of organizations across the U.S., including Black Enterprise, Philadelphia Works, Villanova University, and Black Women Talk Tech. How are you doing today, Tanya?
I'm doing well. It's good to be here with you, Kison.
Hey, my pleasure. Can you tell us your story?
Well, let's see. I was a psychology major in college and I loved psychology. And I had this plan, like a lot of people do at 22. I had this plan. I was going to go and do research. And I thought I should get a little bit of experience working in the field I want to be in before dedicating my life to research. And so I went and I worked in a few nonprofit agencies. And so I was working in community mental health and fell in love with it, decided didn't want to do research, wanted to keep working with people. So I went back for my graduate degree. And over the years of working in community mental health agencies, I just kept experiencing the same thing where I would see people who look like me get treated really poorly, get poor mental health services. And I would talk to people in leadership and say, what can we do to change this? And there didn't seem to be much interest in making a change. Or I would be in a place where the services were fantastic. We were giving great therapy services, but the people receiving them did not look like me. And I would talk to leadership and say, how can we diversify so that there are more Black people receiving great therapy services? And again, there wasn't much interest. And so after some time of hitting my head against the same brick wall in a different agency, I realized, you know what, the common denominator here, I have an issue that I'm not willing to let go of. So let me see if I can do it on my own and do it better on my own. And so I started out in 2004 and it was just me. And so I was dedicated to providing great therapy services to Black folk in my area. And then it has grown significantly since I stepped out on my own. The company I have today is very different than what I set out to do in a great way.
Such a great story. You took control of your own destiny.
And I've realized this over the years, but if you don't see it, then you make it, right? You make it happen.
Absolutely. What are your top three principles that attributed to your success?
Oh, I would say the top three are: don't be the smartest in the room. Make sure that you surround yourself with people who are supportive and challenging. So not yes people, but people who are supportive and challenging. And then everybody says this, but failure will happen. It is not a straight line to success. And so failure is a horrible part of, for me, it's a horrible part of the process, but part of the process that you just have to accept. And you take the hits, lick your wounds, and you get back up.
These are great. You ready to take them apart?
Ready to take them apart.
Let's do the first one. Don't be the smartest in the room. Let's
Yes.
break that down and turn into some practical how-tos.
Sure. So if you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. It is great to know your intellect, to know your capabilities and skill sets. That is really important. Everybody should know that. And when you are in meetings or at conferences or just wherever you are kind of business focused, and you realize, ooh, I know the most out of the people in this room, then it's time to get into different rooms. And I do remember, and I think this happens throughout our career. I don't think it's just early on. You start getting comfortable. You start going to the same places, doing the same things, talking to the same people. And you realize, like, I've learned what I can learn from this group at this moment in time. And it does not mean there's anything wrong with the group at all. It just means it's time to challenge yourself, where you are now in rooms where you realize, like, oh my goodness, I only understood 25% of what they were talking about. There's a lot that was happening that I didn't understand, which means there's a lot for me to learn and grow. And so I think you have, as an individual, need to be cognizant of that. Like, when you feel so comfortable and you know everything, then it's time to start switching up where you are.
Yeah, I like this because I'm a big believer the phrase that you're the average of your five closest relationships. I like your view because it's, hey, you're learning, essentially learning from those closest relationships you have, and they're shaping you and challenging you. But you need to be conscious of how can you keep evolving that, where you're adding new people in that circle and continuously challenging yourself. So you're progressively learning and being really proactive about it.
Definitely.
How would you do that if it's, here's the idea, but let's even take it a step further and making it into a practical approach? Like, what would you specifically do to get yourself to make that happen when you're like, all right, I'm the smartest person in the room. Now, how do I change that?
That's a good question. It starts with expanding your purview. And so, just in a really practical way, how are you taking in information? So are you on LinkedIn, and who are you following on LinkedIn? And is that how you're learning about conferences? Is that how you're learning about, networking events? And if that is how you're doing it, I'm not saying you have to change platforms or anything, but it's time to expand where you get those opportunities and that information from. So go through your contacts and look at somebody who you're not very close to, who is different than you are, and start looking and seeing, what are they doing? Like, what events are they going to? What conferences are they attending? And then based on that, looks interesting to me. Not what do I understand, not what information do I already have, but just kind of going through and saying, oh, that looks interesting, I'm going to try it.
Yeah, I feel like this can also align with your career goals too, where it's like, hey, here's certain people I want to network with when you think about those event platforms and
Hmm.
communities to become part of. I'm a big proponent of networking on LinkedIn
Hmm.
because then you
Hmm.
can target people and saying, hey, I want to be like you when I grow up. Can, just connect with some line around that, follow up with, love to learn from your experience and see if you can open up an introductory phone call.
Yeah, and I would also add connecting with people you want to learn from, and be thoughtful of what you're going to offer to them as well, because people are busy, as you know. And so definitely asking how can you kind of make that connection, and then think about what value do you have to give them, something I would say. And I would also expand a little bit in thinking about what sparks your interest. I think sometimes we can get so focused on this is the path, this is the direction, and I can't steer from it. When there's times where you'll see that event sounds interesting. Oh, but I said I'm not doing that. So we kind of block ourselves from opportunities that really could lead to, I think, some great success. I'll tell you a quick story. This was years ago when I live in the city of Philadelphia, and there was an event to support female political candidates. And I wanted to go. I thought it was going to be interesting, and I wanted to go. And so I talked to some people in my network to see if anybody wanted to come with me. Nobody wanted to go. It would have been really easy for me to say, well, okay, I just won't go. I went by myself. And so I went by myself. I talked to people, networked, and I'm an introvert. So I'm talking as though it sounds easy. That was not easy for me to do.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be in a different room, in a different space. And I wasn't going to be held back because I didn't have somebody to go with. And so I did go and I did talk to people. And long story short, I ended up connecting with this incredible woman there, and we chatted and we developed a relationship, and ended up, she introduced me to a corporate client that I did work with them. So and ultimately got business out of going to events simply because it was of interest to me. Had nothing to do with my work. It was not specifically for Black people at all. I was probably one of a few Black people in the room, but it just sparked my interest. And so I went. And so I think that's also how you get into places where you're not the smartest in the room, because you do things that are different.
There is an element of challenging yourself and getting out of your comfort zone there.
Significantly. I think that's how you grow. If you're only comfortable, you'll be comfortable, but you'll be comfortable and you'll stay the same for 20 years. And that's frankly boring.
That's true. And then your friends missed out. They couldn't overcome their biases to try something different or explore.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I have great friends because they didn't want to go. They didn't regret not going. And they were all for me going too. They're like, oh, I'm so glad you went. I'm glad you had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. I like that one. I like that. Hey, can you get around the group that's actually going to help you develop and learn new things and push yourself in that direction, be conscious about it. The other principle you mentioned was the people you're around and how they support and challenge you. Can we talk about that one?
Yes. So you have to have a strong tribe, I think, to be successful in life, honestly, but definitely successful in business. And I think the more you advance in your career, the lonelier it can be, frankly. And so I think having people who want you to succeed in your vision. And I think these are people that you work with, and these are people who you don't work with. Right? So people you work with, they need to believe in your vision and support your vision. And the people you don't work with need to believe and support you. And so when I say support, when you have a bad day, they need to be able to hear how horrible that day was, especially in your personal life, how awful it was. And it doesn't mean they can make it better, but they'll listen and understand that you had a really rough day. And that when you have a great day and you have success, that they're the ones saying, let's go celebrate. What do you want to do? Do you want to go to the beach for the day? Do you want to go out to dinner? Like, let's go celebrate this win. But then you really got people who want you to do well and want you to do well and are willing to tell you the truth. So not yes people. Yes people are not useful. I don't find them useful. They feel good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help you grow as a person. It doesn't help you grow in your company or your role. So you need people who also are going to say, wait, Tonya, you sure going to do that? Or have you thought about it this way? Or I see your point, Tonya, or maybe I don't see your point. This doesn't make any sense to me. You say you want to do this, but we're talking about this and this doesn't make any sense. So let's keep talking about it. That you need people, to me, part of a tribe are people who are going to challenge you, people who are going to disagree with you.
So we have support people. Would like mentors, advisors also fit in this group?
Oh, definitely. I think good mentors and advisors aren't yes people. they're
Yeah,
the ones, right? They're the ones saying, I'm watching you go to the left and I think you want to go to the right based on everything you've told me is your goal.
I like it. In our company, I have to have a disclaimer, and I tell people, especially new people, that hey, I don't spend the time to sugarcoat things or really focus on the positive. I know I jump to the criticism because I think
Mhm,
that's the area that where it can add value. If we can
mhm.
identify the areas to improve. And so I skip it over, and it's not to hurt your feelings or anything like that. There's a little bit of that. And I almost feel like you can do the reverse where you can encourage people to saying, look, I appreciate the positive feedback, but this is what I'm really looking for. I don't know if you take that approach where I want to hear the bad. I have people report to me and I want the criticism as a leader. I remember having one time, I like doing exit interviews too. Usually we can get them in if you're departing on good terms.
Mhm.
I remember going home and actually having like an update interview with my daughter. Hey, can you give me some feedback how I'm doing as a dad?
Oh,
No,
that's great.
it was fun. It was an eye opener because what I thought she would note as positive things, she noted as the negative and vice versa.
Oh,
Like
wow.
the
That's
good
really
traits were like, I
eye-opening.
like that you're disciplined and this and that. But it was funny. The negative was like, you should be easier on the middle kid that we have. He's very sensitive. So
That's great feedback.
it's funny. But it's one of those things where you encourage it, you actually get it, and sometimes you do. And I don't know if you found it the same where you have this support group around you, and they tend to lean a little bit more about making you feel good to encourage you, which is good, encouraging people to pursue their goals, but then being very proactive about the inversion. Like, what are those specific things that are going to prevent you from achieving those goals? Help me understand that so I can make sure they don't happen.
Yeah, I have to say, when I think of my tribe, I get feedback, and I think it's because I say I want it. So definitely in my personal life, I have friends, my partner, like will say, that's not right, Tonya. They give that to me. And then it works. I do think it's harder when you're the boss to get direct feedback. So it's not true of everybody, but I think just some people who are willing to take that risk of just giving me direct feedback do. And I find myself going to those people more for feedback. So like there are a couple people in my mind where if I want to know the truth, they'll tell me you did this well, this you could have done this better, or this was totally off base. And there's people who will like tell it to me straight. And that's what I need. That's what I want.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Are there approaches in terms of, hey, if maybe you're somebody out there that doesn't feel confident or has a strong support network or tribe, in terms of how do you approach developing that group?
I think it's about genuine relationships. So it's similar to networking, it's similar to mentoring. It's just about how do you have real relationships with people who want what's good for you. And if they want what's good for you, they are going to lift you up in love and they are also going to tell you when you're off base. So I would focus on developing real relationships. And so if it's in the workplace, you could say, listen, I'm trying to grow as a leader, or I'm trying to grow in this is a new role. And this is an entry level role and I'm trying to grow so I can really master this role. Can you give me some guidance and feedback along the way? Can you tell me what you see that is good about what I'm doing and what needs to be different? And so you can have that direct conversation with your manager. You can have it with a colleague who might have more experience than you, or even a colleague that has the same amount or less experience than you, because they'll have a different perspective when they're not the one kind of overseeing your work.
It sounds like the key component is being open and vulnerable.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, which is not, I don't find it easy, but I do think that is what, I think that's what drives growth.
That's something to talk about. We're both introverted. And I struggled with it for years and years. I was always a person that would fear public speaking over death. I'd go to public events. I was a wallflower, highly social anxiety, everything.
Yes, I hear it.
But then, people listening to this, like you can actually overcome it. And I want to
Yes,
hear like, what was that like for you? Because I can tell you don't hesitate. You're on a podcast right now. We're live on video.
right. Right. No, and similar to you, I mean, I was painfully shy as a child. I had stomach aches every day before going to school, just the thought of having to speak. And I hear And I can empathize with you about being shy and being an introvert. And so I think a couple of things happened along the way as I aged. I remember kind of going to college, realizing that if I wanted to have a life, I was going to have to do things a little bit differently. And so it's not that I wasn't shy. It's not that I wasn't nervous anymore, but I just wanted things to be different than they had been. And so that was enough of a motivator for me to speak up more than I had been speaking up. So that I think was probably the first shift. And then I did some speaking work as you had to for presentations or whatever. And it would take a lot out of me. And I remember there was a time in my career where I remember telling my husband, like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not public speaking. It's not worth it. It takes too much energy. And so I didn't for a period of time. And then I think what happened was, I think I came to another point in my career and realized, like, no, if I don't, I'm holding my business back. And so again, like, okay, if this is what I have to do, then I'll do it. And so I've come to enjoy speaking publicly because I've spent more time understanding what I need to enjoy it. So I practice, that helps, but it's actually the things kind of outside of speaking that helps me get ready. So I'll take a walk, I'll listen to music, I will plan my day so that I have a break afterward where I'm not talking to anybody. So as an introvert, that's really helpful. Like, I can give while I'm speaking as long as I can go back into my cocoon afterward. And I do that actually, not just speaking, even at events. I have a trick that if I have to go, this is pre-COVID, if I have to go to an event and there's valet service, car service, I often won't park in valet. I'll often find a parking spot on the street. Because when I'm done, like when my energy is over, I want to leave. And I don't want to have to wait another 15 minutes to get my car and have to talk more to the people who are also waiting for their car. I want to leave the event, walk to my car and get in my car.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of just tricks I picked up along the way of, like, how do I take care of the soft parts of me, even when I'm going to kind of speak publicly and be extroverted in a moment in time, but kind of go back to my nature of being introverted later.
So I got one is goals. Your original goal is having a life, and that became your motivator.
Yep.
And then second was practice. That you really push yourself to get out there and practice and overcome some of those anxieties, phobias, etc. And then you got to a point where it became like mastery. You kind of had your own nuances, style, and finesse that you brought to it, and really owned it from there. So it was great to hear about that.
Yeah, thanks. And to your point about practice, I think just because you're scared of something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? And you become less fearful the more you do it, and you become better the more you do it. I think that's a key piece of it.
100% agree. Let's talk about failure.
Let's talk about failure.
It's almost like failure is the best way to learn. You can learn things from reading books and hearing other people tell it, which obviously anything you can do to shorten your learning curve as least painful as possible is ideal. But then the lessons you learn from failure are the ones that you don't forget.
You know what? That is so true. 100% agree. And I hate it. I just want to be honest. I mean, I 100% agree. The biggest lessons are not the successes. It's the ones where you fall flat on your face. And even though I know it, it still doesn't feel good. It's still painful. I'm very sensitive. I feel things deeply. And I think that's the kind of double-edged sword of my superpower. It's also what makes me incredibly good at my work. And I feel things deeply. And so I know that. So when failure happens, I'm going to feel it, and I will recover, and I'll learn, and I will learn from it without a doubt.
What's the mindset? Is it, hey, I know there's a chance of failure, I'm going to embrace it? Or am I going to try to avoid everything possible from failure? Or does it just, I don't think about it as much, I let it happen and reflect back on what I learned from it? What's your thinking around how you approach failure?
So I think in my mind, I kind of have two buckets of failure. I feel like the failure that hurts the most for me is where somebody gets hurt, right? Failure where I make a misstep and somebody is hurt as a result of it. That is the hardest one to come back from.
Yeah.
That's a deeper level of failure. That's different than failure of, let's try this idea. It didn't work. Nobody got hurt. It didn't work. It is different. It's really,
I feel like you kind of have like anticipated risk. And then the misstep are the ones where you're really kicking your butt afterwards.
Yes.
So.
Yes. The ones where you're picking apart every single thing. And for me, what I've realized over time, those deep failures are the ones when I'm avoiding the problem. It's when I avoid something and I let it stretch on and go on too long, that by the time I have to deal with it, like feelings are going to get hurt. Something is not just because I didn't deal with it sooner. That's when it's really hard, which is different than, you're right, than the example you were saying, kind of anticipated risks. Like, when we're running a pilot program and we might lose some money and we might not get the results that we anticipate, but it's okay. We're trying it out. That's part of the process. Is different than, you're going along in business. And here, I'll give you an example. This was earlier on in the company when I think I might have had 2 or 3 employees at this time. And, we were paying our bills, paying salary, doing all of that, but I wasn't putting enough money aside for taxes. And so when taxes came, and I was just like, in the back of my mind, I remember like, I should probably put more away, but everything's okay. So I just kind of ignored that whisper until tax time came and I got that bill and I had to pay a lot of money in taxes that my company didn't have at the time. And so that was a gut punch. A big part of the gut punch was because it was something I kind of knew about, but I was avoiding the whole time. Now we're in a serious situation where I have to go have this discussion with my husband of like, do I shut down the business because I didn't have enough money saved? That's not fun. Obviously, I didn't shut down the business. We pulled on joint savings to pay the taxes. And to your point earlier, and that's when I after that happened, that is when I was like, okay, Tonya, you cannot be responsible for finances anymore. You're ultimately responsible, but now you need to hire somebody to make sure this never happens again. Yeah. Which, we did, and we have a fantastic person. It took a while to get to where we are, but I'll never do that again. That was a hard lesson.
That's a great example of a failure that you really learn from, that you could have read things about, or somebody could have, like mom could have told you, but you wouldn't really took it to heart and learned as much as you've gone through it, the experience to like really know, like, we're not going to let that happen again.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I think, for people listening to this, and when you read articles and you'll read other people's stories and you'll read mistakes that you will work hard not to avoid, but then you'll make a different mistake that will be really, really deep, to your point, that makes a lasting impression. Because reading about someone's mistake or hearing someone's mistake is really different than making your own.
That's true. Any other thoughts around how to, I almost wonder if there's a component of just bouncing back from failure, because I think that resiliency is one of the critical sort of counter skills to develop, that, hey, I'm, you essentially learn to embrace failure, but as much like to really know that I'm going to come back bigger and better from that failure. I just feel like I've seen it where it can throw people off and maybe they don't bounce back because it let them take the toll on them. And I'm curious is there mechanisms around that? Is it being optimism? Like, how do you sort of think through that component of failure?
So I think for me, and this has been part of my success, I'm really stubborn. I'm really determined. I've been like, that's like me. That's part of my core. There's who I am. And so if I mess up, I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to try not to do it again. And if I do it again, I'm going to fix it again. So I think that's just kind of core to who I am, of wanting to get it right and wanting to untangle messes if I've created one. For me, it's just not okay to leave it that way. Like, I have to do something to fix it. I think that's part of how I kind of make amends with myself, is trying to fix the problem. But I think for me, I'm just really stubborn. So
yeah, well, you stay aligned with your determination, and maybe that's like the takeaways, that if somebody takes that failure, it's realigning yourself with that determination of what you're trying to do and get right back at it, get back on the horse per se.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense to, when you get knocked down, it's okay to wallow there for a little bit. You just don't stay there, right? I'm not saying you're right back at it the next day. Like, you get to be sad and upset and regretful, and feel your feelings. I think honestly, it's actually better. Feel your feelings, get them out, let them be true, talk to people, your tribe, like, let them know, because I think when you keep it secret, it becomes really shameful. And when it becomes shameful, it eats you up and it comes out sideways in really negative ways. So something I think I've been better at, in I'd say the past 3 or 4 years, is when I make a mistake that I publicly like own it. Like I'll talk to my tribe and say, I can't believe I did this. And, you know, they'll help me, remind me to be compassionate with myself for making the mistake. And then it's easier to like, okay, this is what I did. I know what I did. Now I can try and address it.
I like that. What's the best mistake you ever made?
The best mistake, the most painful mistake. It's the one I shared with you, actually. That's it, because it changed the way I took my business seriously. It helped me realize on a deeper level the responsibility I had, because it wasn't just about Tonya, but I had employees. And when it affected my husband, like it just hit me on a very different level, that it's just not about me. And I understand that on a deeper level, and then bringing in somebody who's an expert in finances, like just really changed the company significantly.
That failure made you a stronger leader.
So much stronger. So much stronger. Yeah.
Tonya, thank you so much for your time today. I enjoyed this conversation.
So did I. Appreciate the time and the questions. This has been lovely. Thank you.